it's his first like wedding night, and he goes to the pharmacist. He wants to pick up a box of condoms, and he actually ends up purchasing everything around it, but and returns home without it. So his wife is saying, what do I do of biscuits right now? What do I do of shampoo right now? You went there to get something.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Takeaway Club. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about a very delicate subject but an important one in the context of our country's growth. Quite literally, my guest today to discuss that is Aruna Chawla, who is the founder of Salad, an up and coming D2C brand in the intimate health and wellness industry. For a generation growing up with a lot of hush hush on the topic, and the most prominent mentions for the product probably coming from a rascal reference in Friends or awkward television ad during family dinners, this was a great chance for me to understand what goes on behind a product like condoms. We are going to be talking about the business operations and the economics behind a company in this industry typically, and how Salad is doing things differently to take on the market giants. Personally, it was super fun and insightful for me to have this conversation, and I have a feeling you might enjoy it too. Without further ado, let's get right down to it. Hey Aruna,
Hey, how are you doing, Chris?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for accepting my invitation to be on the Takeaway Club. The Takeaway Club's moniker goes by, finding the most interesting people and look for the most interesting work that they do. And whatever you do with Salad perfectly fits that. I was thinking a good place to start would be for people who don't know Aruna, people who don't know what you're doing with Salad. Maybe a quick introduction. Who is Aruna and what is her story?
Absolutely. So I am the founder of one of the coolest brands of condoms in the country. It's already a topic that invites so much intrigue, right? Oh, a brand of condoms, you want to go check it out. Salad's idea is that to push for safe sex, and we started off with the idea that sexual health and intimate health and wellness products should be accessible not just from a price point, but also socially to the masses of the country. I'm a founder of a brand like that. And I'm an accidental entrepreneur, right? I didn't start off with the idea that I'd want to do my own business. I moved from law to buyer psychology because my big passion in life is to understand how people make purchase decisions online. This is a direct offshoot of my love for online shopping. Like I think like any I know this is a very stereotypical thing to say, but the idea is that, women love shopping. And I think online shopping is fantastic already for men, for women, for whatever age group you are at. You can be at home or you can be wherever you are and you have the world at your fingertips. I love that. And I wanted to understand more about it. That's how I got into buyer psychology, switched my career paths, and part of my research led me to understanding how the intimate health and wellness industry, especially with offline purchasing, is so broken. You can't go to pharmacists and educate yourself. You don't have enough information online. There's a major asymmetry that's going on. Salad was born in this sweet spot.
That's amazing. A lot of interesting threads for me to pick on from that. And I'll start with the most obvious one, right? You did your undergrad in law. What piques my interest most is why the transition from law to entrepreneurship, right? Interestingly, the last guest I had was Tanvi from Filter Coffee. He's studying law actually. Filter Coffee is one of the most popular new media brands in the country at the moment. That's a nice coincidence there. I wonder what prompted you to consider a similar switch in an industry that you don't really hear a lot about, right?
Yeah. So, I know that since my childhood, I've been a person who's let curiosity lead her life. I always wanted to read law. I think there was never a second option that I'd kept for myself. And I thought law was really interesting. Not just because of, like, I didn't think at that time too much about career prospects or other things, but it was simply that in these 5 years, I'm going to get to explore so many different ways of thinking, so many different mental models, different subjects. There'll be a lot of interdisciplinary learning, which law allowed me. And that's how I got into it. However, in my internships, when you get into the real world, you do your internships, you go to court, you go for law firm experiences. You then make a choice if the career is for you or not. And I didn't think that hustle life was for me. I wanted a very relaxed life. I wanted it. I always saw myself as somebody who'd look forward to work life balance, who'd want to stay a lot more at home, not just work life balance, but a lot more of life than work. That was always the idea. And the traditional legal path never allowed for that. So, although I loved studying law, the practice of it was something that I wanted to evade. The challenge was I didn't know what else to do. Right. So I continued, I like finished my undergrad. I read a lot about art and fashion law because at that time I thought that, these are different areas of interest I have. Let me explore what's something unique I can do in this. So that was great. I was working with the UN right after law school. I've written a book on art laws. I've conducted a lot of workshops across the country and internationally as well. But there was just that passion was missing. It was super profitable, it was super purposeful. I knew I was making great impact in the lives of so many creative professionals and equipping them with, useful skills that can make their careers better. But I was just not too passionate about it. And eventually leading like that curiosity led me to exploring more about online purchasing, customer behavior, customer journeys. I love the internet. I think it's phenomenal. I don't know a life without the internet, but my parents do. And, I've always been quite curious about how the world continues to change with that. And that's how I came across this idea called buyer psychology. And when I found that, I knew I'd hit the nail on its head because this is what I'm meant to do. So it was more out of academic interest that I found my passion. Eventually, that led to agency work that I do with a lot of international brands. And part of the research led to this idea that, there's an immense opportunity in an industry like this. I also come with very unique experience as a buyer psychologist to really change behavioral norms, to really look at how brand messaging can alter how people consider a brand and an entire industry. And that's how that led to my second entrepreneurial venture in a product based line.
That's beautiful. But I still wonder, it's one thing to jump from law to entrepreneurship and another to do in a category like intimate wellness. What do you think gave you that conviction that this is the problem that I need to be solving?
I'm a big realist. I'm super pragmatic about how I want to lead life, and I want to do a good job, but I also want to lead like a good, luxurious life. The intimate health and wellness industry by itself and the condom industry specifically has major barriers to entry. There are government ceilings on the price point, so we can't sell a condom for more than 9.15 rupees per pop. Every year, obviously, the budget changes, but it's minuscule to actually make an impact. If this were to be your bread and butter right off the bat, it would not. You would have to invest a lot more in the early days, which means that smaller players or smaller businesses like me will anyway not be able to do it, right? I think like despite the age I'm at, I started working on salad when I was 25 last year, launched this year. Despite that age, I was in a financially sound position. I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget this, but you have to sustain. The only way to do good at what you do is if you're able to provide for yourself, right? And I was in that position with the agency work I did. That gave me the risk taking appetite. If I didn't have that kind of cushioning for myself, I could not have planned for a business that would take about 2 to 2.5 years to reach profitability, right? Because for a brand like this, we will reach profitability only when we get to that distribution numbers, which we are not looking at for the next 1.5 years. We're only looking at building the brand, building that kind of recall value. And that needs a lot of upfront investment with delayed returns. And at this age, I can only make that happen, or I can only have that kind of risk appetite if I have a cushion for myself. I think that's one thing that pushes away a lot of people. Two, the industry itself is tiny. 5.6% of the country uses condoms in total. 47% use no form of contraception. Despite this being the cheapest form of contraception and the only form of contraception that also prevents STIs, right? And there are huge like challenges with that. It's cheap, but that necessarily does not mean that it's going to be accessible. We have a lot of production capabilities in the country, but there's lack of social accessibility. There's a movie that's coming up with this Ayushmann Khurrana's brother, where he goes, and the trailer is where he goes to. It's his first like wedding night, and he goes to the pharmacist. He wants to pick up a box of condoms, and he actually ends up purchasing everything around it, but and returns home without it. So his wife is saying, what do I do of biscuits right now? What do I do of shampoo right now? You went there to get something. And it's interesting, right? Because that's a public space, only men are around. It's night time. He's gone to a pharmacist. He looks like a well educated guy. But that's the reality of our country, right? There's a lot of social stigma behind making these choices. You don't want to look like a sexual being at all, even for men, not just for women, even for men. I mean, I always use this analogy that, you'd go to a chroma store to buy your iPhone, for example, or and you will spend at least 30 minutes going through, trying it out, looking at the different models available. But when you go to pick up a box of condoms, you'll ask the pharmacist, look somewhere else, he'll put it in your hand, and you'll run away. Right. And this goes in the most intimate part of your body. So that really needs some kind of radically different thinking to lead to that. And if I were to look at just the way other businesses, other companies work and say, I'm going to follow this, it's not going to make a difference. The deal here, the difference with salad is not just that we're a brand of condoms, it's that we come with a completely radical way of looking at the industry and its future altogether, which is what's unique about like my involvement and my background as a buyer psychologist and also as a woman, right? Like we need that kind of resources. We need to be able to exercise bodily autonomy. We need to be able to say, this does not work for me. I'm going to give it a shot, but this person does not work for me. So let's move on, for example. And we need the opportunity to have safe sex. That's for anybody across the world. So I think those are really interesting things that I feel that really are the meat behind salad.
I love it. So, which brings me to this. What were the first few months like?
Right. So I'll start with the restraints we had. And it's interesting about, like, I think it's interesting how I looked at those restraints. This is an essential medical commodity. So any research, innovation, production, sales, any of this is it's necessary to have government approvals. As a small business, we could not afford any of that. So we were restrained to use what's available already, what kind of research has already cleared mandate. That actually limited our focus majorly. The good thing about that was we could just focus on if this works for us or not. The challenge was, as a woman, finding a manufacturer who would actually talk to me. 99% manufacturers told me that I need to come back with my father or husband or brother to even take this conversation forward on phone. This was last year during the pandemic. This wasn't even, when I was visiting their factories or any of that. This was completely on phone. I was ready to pay. I was ready to pick up a good amount of stock. I was a ready paying customer, but they were not ready to deal with a woman because how can a woman be in a condom industry, right? So that was the biggest Goliath I had to fight. Eventually, we found a manufacturer who ensured that the working space was safe as well. Unfortunately, even working spaces in these industries are like factories etc are not as safe for women. They're closed. You don't have you have only men around. So that takes away from the kind of comfort you feel. But the manufacturer that we did end up finalizing and working with, we still work with them, ensured that these were not the challenges. So that was the biggest fight that we had to get into to launch salad. After that, things became a lot more smoother. We got great response. Our product sold out in the first 16 days via a type form, 100% organic growth. Thanks to Clubhouse, I hosted a lot of sessions on Clubhouse. There was a lot of word of mouth that was going on. And that's interesting, right? Condoms are available aplenty. This is not something you talk about. Durex is a fun brand. I've always loved their branding. But clearly, there was need for a better, more nuanced conversation, and salad really hit the nail there. In the last 2.5 months, our challenges have been like any other D2C business, especially working in the pandemic, ensuring the condoms get to their users on time. The packaging is discreet enough so that their parents are not too inquisitive. We still live in a country where very little privacy is enabled. So those are just like any other business, but from the product itself, we've got phenomenal response from our customers. We've got a lot of repeat buyers, a lot of interest is being generated, and it's all been 100% organic. We've not gotten into any kind of paid marketing till now. because there's just so much word of mouth that's going on. The product quality is good, the messaging stands out. So I think we're just really working on tying those loose ends and slowly scaling it up instead of rushing into anything.
So I'd love to understand if you can give me a walkthrough of what your operational process is like. So what aspects of the business do you take care of? So what's the team like, and which part gets outsourced to external vendors, etc.
Okay, so essentially, what always happens, and you can pick up any condom box around you and find this out. All condom brands are essentially marketing companies because you outsource marketing to a factory that has government licenses. It's critical. Our condoms go through 100% electronic testing, which means it's not random batches that go for testing. Every single condom has to be tested to be eligible to get out of that factory, basically, right? So that part is outsourced, of course. I am Salad is for now I'm the sole founder. It's 100% bootstrapped business. I do have like a consultant team of people who are working with me on the social media aspect of it, but for now we are a super lean team. Speaking to somebody who will be joining in as co-founder and leading marketing, PR, etc. So I can focus more on the operational, product development, business development aspects of it. But we're taking it really slow. I mean, the business industry itself is huge, and it's a very non-traditional way of working in it, but we're really looking at it as a lean startup, like a one person led startup, and slowly expanding, getting more people. The next hire is going to be a community manager. We're actively looking for somebody with a strong voice, and inclusive outlook towards our audience members, and the drive to learn, because we're all learning on the go. The challenge with sex ed especially is that we none of us are taught these things, right? We go through these things via internet, like experiences, etc. But there's very little personal, like how your elders will tell you about good morals and how to look after yourself, how to take care of guests who come over. Sex ed and intimate health and wellness is never spoken about. So these are things that we're always constantly learning. So our team is growing in that sense, and we're speaking to a lot of people. Sex educators will be working on a lot of digital products in the next 1 year. So that's how we're going to be expanding the team in the coming months.
First of all, mad respect to you. So I went through the Salad website and the kind of messaging you have, and everything, until actually the part where you click buy now, right? So up until that, I went through the entire flow, and all of that coming from a single person is amazing, right? Tying back to one of the other points that you mentioned while you were talking about this is the industry itself is peculiar in that there is obviously a lot of headroom for growth, right? Because only such a small percentage of the population actually use condoms. But at the same time, when you look at the brands who are already doing it, there is heavy saturation, right? Between Durex or Manforce or Kohinoor, you have 2 or 3 big players who kind of capture most of the market share from my understanding. So what are all some of the challenges that you face as a brand to establish that voice? Along those lines, what are some things that you do uniquely which you feel will help you give that edge over the incumbents?
Like I mentioned, 47% of the country uses no form of contraceptives, 5.6% uses condoms, which means that the difference is of, like contraceptives that are used are internal, like oral contraceptives, invasive contraceptives. The challenge is that maximum percentage of these are consumed by women instead of men. Even for sterilization, 0.6% of men, when the for family planning, go for a vasectomy or like a permanent sterilization, versus 32% of women. So the burden of ensuring unplanned pregnancies don't happen is unfairly just on women. And it's interesting. Like, I think the stats are mind blowing. A man can have sex for 365 days a year and impregnate 365 women through that year. I'm saying just like once a day. A woman can get pregnant just once, right? Like, and then she's to go through that pregnancy for 9 months, and only after that you can get there. So it's appalling how the women's bodies are being regulated despite there being a clear demarcation on what needs to be done. For a brand of condoms, the challenge is that we don't talk about sex at all. It's always talked about in hush hush. So if you have the privilege, you'd rather go to your gynecologist, get something that you can, in the privacy of your personhood, consume or get implanted in your body so that others don't see, they don't find out, etc. And that's not a privilege that's afforded to a majority of the population that are living in tier 2, tier 3 cities, in villages, etc., because there is dearth of those expert knowledge subject matter resources, which means that they either have to depend on the pull out method or their husbands, deciding what to do for them. That's a big challenge that as a condom brand, any condom brand faces, not just salad. For us, we've kept our market very niche. We are focusing on the tier 1 cities for now. We are focusing on the metropolitans. Our messaging is towards the educated elite who would either use other forms of contraceptives or not use contraceptives at all. Our idea is to really stand out, right? That's what you want to do. You want to be radically different. I think what Durex did when they were bursting into the scenario and really establishing their presence was super interesting. Before them, condom brands would always go for the male gaze pornography clad, like the pornographic imagery, lingerie clad women. So there was a clear idea that these brands are pleasure focused, and it was clear whose pleasure they're focusing on, right? There was no conversation about women's pleasure, orgasms, etc. Durex really broke that mold. They started talking about sex in a quirky way. There was very little, like, it was just fun. Where salad comes into play is that we're not even looking at that alpha male category at all. We are having a lot of fun. If you look at our Instagram, we're pop colors, we have a very interesting packaging, it stands out. At the same time, we're talking a lot about sex ed, we're having fun, we're cracking jokes, we're using memes. Our language is 100% inclusive at the same time, right? I think it's I do a lot, a lot of people in previous interviews have also asked me if it's challenging to navigate that balance between having fun and being inclusive. I don't think it should be a challenge, like joking around or educating people should not be at the expense of anybody's identity. So those are some things that we have really been conscious of. And I think that's what's really helping us stand apart. Two, this is a small business, right? Like when we see the person behind a business, when we learn about the story of why a business starts instead of conglomerates or monopolies, there is a sense of um, relevancy that gets built. You're able to relate to that business, you're able to relate to the founder. So I think that's working out really well for us as we grow the business. And I think that's only possible because of the internet. If 10 years ago you'd have asked me if I could have built a brand like this, or even 5 years ago, maybe not. It's only possible because the internet gives you the ability to operationalize and automate so many things, build digital web stores, interact with your customers one on one instead of behind boardrooms. That it makes possible for brands like ours to exist and thrive.
That's true. With the pandemic, that has been one of the other silver linings, right? So, a lot of things that we didn't think could be done over the internet, we have been forced to adapt to. I think that certainly played a part here. What is your last mile delivery strategy like? Obviously, with condoms, there is a certain level of privacy, and you have to ensure that the packaging doesn't actually tell what the product is about and all that. What do you do on that front in terms of both packaging and delivering your products?
Right. So one, we're a purely D2C company for now, and online D2C company. So we're only delivering the product to like wherever our customers want them to. Box packaging is completely private, right? There's no mention of this being a box of condoms. The invoice that goes in says medical product, and there's just absolutely no mention. We don't want to do any kind of branding there. Even on the box, it's just very timeless cost because government mandates. We have like the packaging is attractive, so you'd want to pick it up. The constant response we've got from our customers, and it's great that we have so many customer reviews and feedback. It looks like a board game, or it looks like a box of cards. So you'd pick it up and say, oh, it looks very pretty, but only if you really read it deeply that you'll understand that it's a box of condoms. So that's been really helpful for us. Two, we're using a lot of QR codes on our box packaging. So instead of giving all the details on the packaging in a leaflets, etc., we just have QR codes you can scan and go to. So we're one of the few brands who have the ingredients of what goes inside your condom available on our website, which you can access directly from the box. Because it's a medical product, we are actually not obligated to divulge information on what goes inside the product. But I think it's critical for us to know about this. Like it's, I mean, if I were to look at it just personally, it goes in the most private part of my body. Why should I not know what it's made of or what can cause an allergy? I need to be aware, right? That's something that we're doing very different, and that's working out really well for us because we're also an online first brand. Social media is where we're most powerful at right now, and eventually we'll get into offline experiences and digital PR stuff. Just the way we're building the brand is going to be very different, and that's what's really helping us out. Just yesterday, I got a message from one of our customers on our Instagram, and they said, I had my 30th year birthday party and some 30 people were there, and I gave them all return favors, and there was a box of condoms of yours in every bag. So I think those things are very interesting, right? Like we are like right now, our early adopters are people who are open to try. So they are trailblazers. This is a product that you need to trust. And sure, we have all the certifications, but how many people know what certifications are needed for a condom brand, right? To ensure that it's safe or not. So there's a huge level of trust that we have to build, which we're working on every single day.
I'm so glad you brought that up. While doing my research for the conversation, I happened to look at how other brands like, say, a Durex or Score does it. Personal observation was there tends to be a lot of focus on the pleasure aspects of it, all about the pretty colors, the branding, and flavors. The first part of my question is what matters and what doesn't when it comes to a condom. Is something like being ribbed, having it in 7 different fruit flavors, is that the most important aspects that somebody should be considering when they're purchasing a condom? Along those lines, I also understand that you do a few things super differently compared with other brands here. So if you can touch upon that as well, it would be great.
Sure. So, growing up, like with people I spoke to generally, just, generally friends talk about these things, partners speak to you about these things. One constant thing was how nobody likes using condoms because it doesn't feel as good. That's the constant thing, right? You don't know, like for a 5-second orgasm, you will say, oh, it doesn't feel as good. So that's always struck to me, right? And the challenge is that every single brand focuses on pleasure. You'll see mutual climax, you'll see dotted, ribbed, etc. And like although it's not overtly stated with the kind of messaging, the kind of imagery used, it caters to men. It caters to dicks for dicks. Like just to be very clear about it. With salad, we went a completely different route. Our idea is that this is a health first product. If we were to make this pleasure first, then it becomes discardable, and that does not serve our mission. Our idea is that safe sex is critical um, for your bodily autonomy, for the future of our country, for you to be able to exercise choices in a way that enable you to live the life you want to, right? Unplanned pregnancies suck. And if they do happen and you do end up getting an abortion, the woman faces dangers of her body being impacted. So that was very clear, which is why we started off with developing ultra thins. And our tagline is they're so thin you'll barely feel them. And we know that that's working out really well. Our customers, our early adopters love that they can barely feel the condom there. So they know they're making the right choice. They are okay coming back to the product and using it again because they barely feel it. And two, it doesn't feel bad at all. So there's no rubbery smell. There's no weird taste, etc. I personally don't know how much flavors matter. They matter if you were to go down on your partner, which again women will have to do in most cases. But whatever, like even if men were to do that, I would want to be inclusive about it. I saw this really funny video on I think Scoop Poop or something where they were tasting different condom flavors and there was a blind tasting and you had to guess them. Every single one of them was wrong because it's a flavor, right? You can basically smell the rubber or taste the rubber, and then there's this little flavor that's added, little fragrance that's added, and there's a placebo in your head. When you actually see the packet, you'll say, oh yeah, it tastes like banana or strawberry or whatever. But if it's a blind tasting, I don't know how many people will really understand it. So that's it. That's why I don't think like in the coming years we will ever go towards flavors, because that's not our concern. Our idea is that condoms are the healthy choice for you to use, for safe sex, for your intimate health and wellness. But at the same time, we want to be an inconspicuous product. You shouldn't even feel like you're using the product, so that you continue using it. It shouldn't be discardable from your sexual activities.
So I want to zoom out a little bit here and talk about the industry as such. What are all the incentives for a condom manufacturer? So at what, $10 a pop? It seems like it's one of those purchases like how milk is akin to grocery stores, right? So grocery stores lose money when they sell you milk. Would that be a fair comparison, or
I don't think that's a fair comparison, and I'll tell you why. Look, this is not a product that spoils easily. Condoms have an expiry date of 3 years. So if you buy a box and you're going to have sex for say 10 times in 3 years, you still have the product. It's not going to go bad. It becomes profitable only when you get to the masses and when you have enough of a distribution cycle set, which is what also disincentivizes small businesses to enter. Like that's the biggest barrier, right? However, at that scale, it is a hugely profitable business because people who use condoms will keep coming back to it. You have a lot more loyalty. There's a huge sense of brand loyalty for condoms as well. You don't want to try out a different product because it's risky, right? You in your head, like logically, you might know that this is safe to use, but it's still only 99% effective. That 1% is enough scary to push you away, right? From using a different product or using a product that you don't trust. That I think a big advantage in the industry itself, that if you build that kind of brand loyalty, you know this is a person who's going to keep coming back only to you. And that's what we are going to be capitalizing on in the next few years. We want to be a brand that people can trust, for the product quality, for the message, for our social mission, all of this. And that's key here. And I know that, and if if you go study further as well, you'll know that condom brands especially do capitalize on these. There are very few nationally available brands. Manforce, for example, has a 32% market share. Durex has a 13% market share. But Durex's market share is a lot more in urban India, in tier one country, in tier one cities, in the educated youth, who would be on Instagram and say, oh, really quirky messaging, because Marrow Marketing loves Durex, right? They will always keep talking about it. Havas does a great job in marketing Durex and has having established it as like the cool brand of condoms already. Manforce is a different category altogether. So there's a very clear demarcation on who your audiences are, and you keep capitalizing on that. You keep even if you keep selling to those people, you have a good enough market share. The deal with our country is, because again, like 47% use no form of contraception at all. We do have a population boom that keeps happening, right? The good thing is that with the pandemic and with more knowledge, more accessibility to resources, a lot of people are realizing when to have children, when not to have children, and if to have children at all, if you were to look at just the birth control aspect of it. So that's actually in the long run, I think, going to work in the favor of condom businesses, because the industry is only set to grow from here.
Before we wrap up here, just a couple of points that I wanted to pick your brain on. So one is, what are all some of the other initiatives that you have taken at Salad along with your business? And what do you think is the road ahead for Salad?
Super important question. Thank you so much for asking. I love talking about this. 15% of our profits, when I worked on the business structure itself, were committed to social justice issues, which means that we are going to be committing 15% of our profits right from the get go to sex education in schools and colleges in India. This serves multiple purposes. One, it establishes our brand in the eyes of people who are going to be our future users, right? People in schools, colleges, etc. Two, we want to be a sex education first brand. We want to use technology and education to get more people to use the product itself. It becomes circular for us. That's content that we use to do our marketing. We also do it for our audiences. And two, I think like a big picture, again, it ties down really well into the whole aspect of safe sex. So if you do choose to have sex, as long as you ensure it's safe, you're looking after your health and your partner's health, it's consensual, that works for us, right? I think that's critical here. We're working with a lot of sex educators and speaking to them about how we can make this happen, so that the education itself is culturally affirmative. We don't want to pick up just what's available in the West and plant it here, because that's not going to work. I think I have huge challenges with that. There's this whole idea of use time to explore your body in the privacy of your home. We don't live in a country where people have that kind of privacy. We live with families. A lot of people don't even have rooms to themselves. So how are you going to do that? Don't want to be in that situation at all. So those are not conversations that are relevant for us right now. A lot more conversations that are relevant for us are intimate health and wellness. What does unprotected sex really mean, and what can it do for your body? How would pregnancy change your body, for example? A lot of women don't know this. I didn't know this until I did this kind of research, right? So I think those are key areas that we are focusing on majorly. The road ahead in the next 1 year is to establish the brand a lot better. We're just 2 months old, so it's early days for us. We've got good traction. We want to keep building on that momentum. We want to be the cool brand, but that's really smart as well. A proper Gen Z brand, so to say. We're working with sex educators on a lot of workshops that are going to be coming up. And that's how it looks like. Depending on the pandemic, we also might look at offline experiences to do more activations and get out in front of a lot more people. But that's what it looks like for now.
Amazing, amazing. I wish you all the luck for it. I come from probably what is one of the most conservative towns in Tamil Nadu, but whoever needs a recommendation when they have to use condoms, I'm going to keep salad at the top of my mind. Keep rocking. So look forward to seeing you along with the big boys up there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.